Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk. This week I talked to Rabbi Aaron Weininger, the new Senior Rabbi at Adath Jeshurun Congregation. We talk about the work that went into his ascension to Senior Rabbi, what Pride Month means to him as the first openly gay rabbi admitted to the conservative movement's rabbinic school, and the type of evolution he's seen in the movement on LGBTQ issues on this week's Who the Folk podcast. Rabbi Aaron Weininger, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Lonnie. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure to get to talk to you. It's a pleasure to see you again. We were on the Federation's Israel trip together where we saw a lot of each other on that trip. Have a great picture of a goat eating your name tag.
That, I wasn't anticipating that moment, but you captured it as if we had planned it for months.
I know.
For months, we still would not have gotten that shot.
And it would not have come out nearly as fun if had we tried to plan it. You couldn't have planned something like that. Well, thank you for joining me.
Goats pay attention to the rabbi. If somebody does, that's quite an honor.
That's right. Well, it is a pleasure to get to talk to you. You've been a rabbi in the Twin Cities now at Adath Jeshurun for 12 years, but 11 years, because this is why I do words, not math. 11 years. But in the last few weeks, you've undergone a title change in that you are now the senior rabbi at Adath Jeshurun, succeeding your friend and mentor, Rabbi Harold Kravitz. It's a pretty momentous time in the life of a congregation when that happens. In the case of Adath, it's the first time, again, doing math here, but I believe it's the first time there's been this type of rabbinic transition in 27 years.
It's pretty unusual. Rabbi Kravitz is the first rabbi emeritus in the history of the congregation.
Which, when he told me that, was wild, and I had a Adath member who is a mutual friend of the two of us reach out to me and said, "Are you sure that's correct? Because what about Rabbi Citrin?" And I said, "No, I had the same reaction, and Rabbi Kravitz corrected me."
Right. So we're very fortunate. Rabbi Citrin is our senior scholar when he stepped down, and Rabbi Kravitz became the senior rabbi in 1996. And now we get to make this transition. We've made this transition after 2.5 years, which is pretty remarkable, of planning and intention setting to be able to reach this moment, June 1st of 2023, but not just, okay, we're here, what do we do? But for the last 2.5 years, thinking about what this would mean for us, for our relationship, for the health of the congregation, the partnership that we have with our lay leaders. So it's unusual to have that length of time leading to a title change like that.
So I guess if you wouldn't mind, let us sort of in behind the curtain a little bit. What does that look like? Obviously on the the things people see on the website, titles change, order of people get shifted around, but with there's a lovely picture of you and he having swapped offices, that pictures going around on the Adath social media page, but the 2.5 year buildup to something like this, that you use the word intentional, and I think that's really the key word. Like this was planned to take this long. Why was that?
I think that we sometimes pinpoint moments that we have to prepare for. Hopefully they're simcha, sometimes they're sad occasions. And we think of, okay, June 1st, there's going to be a change, but we don't necessarily in our society think about all of the hands and the ideas and the intention that goes into what it means to change titles. Certainly, there was a title change, but kind of the thinking and the process is really important to us, and I think speaks to how we function. It's kind of laying the groundwork so that we can really step into who we want to be. I think about my colleagues tease me. I talk to our preschool students all the time about becoming rabbis and cantors. I think it's too late to talk to college students about a desire to go into the rabbinate or cantor, but I love talking with preschool kids and asking them, so what does a cantor do? What does a rabbi do? I love their answers. They often reflect their interactions with us, but kind of starting that planfulness at an early age and then following up, in third grade, fourth grade. We have a graduating senior who's thinking about rabbinical school very seriously. That seed was planted in third grade. We had a conversation. So I think if we can be planful, we can begin to see some of the challenges around, right, the pipeline, that fewer and fewer students are going to seminary. How can we be creative and planful? And I think this transition allowed us to be creative and planful and to think about what does it mean to transition rabbinic leadership? Rabbi Kravitz has been in this role for a long period of time. And how do we do it in a way that's sensitive to the staff? How do we do it in a way that's sensitive to our lay leaders? And that I think that was exciting for us.
So what does it mean to succeed somebody like Rabbi Kravitz? Because not just because he's been in the role for as long as he has. I think, plenty of people stay in jobs for a long time, clergy and otherwise people stay in jobs for a long time. But somebody like Rabbi Kravitz, who has cultivated leadership roles at national organizations and a national, almost even global level within the conservative movement and conservative Judaism, what is that like for you to sort of step in next in line in that role?
It's an honor. It's really an honor. And to be able to notice that a congregation is also more than one rabbi. It's our team and it's our lay leaders, the people who make possible everything, our incredible facility staff, our catering department, our program staff, our administrative staff, numerous lay leaders. And so the transition really affects everyone, because if we think about it as a team, we all have feelings around it and we all get to notice what's the same and what's different. So to follow Rabbi Kravitz is really an honor. And it's exciting to learn, oh, I didn't know this, or I didn't notice that I would enjoy doing something in this way or that way. And to learn the surprises along the way that end up becoming great teachers. Somebody asked me about 2.5 years ago on the board, Rabbi Weininger, are you going to be ready for this job? I said, no. I said, I don't know anyone who's really ready for a job like this, but I think I know that when we have challenges, I know who our partners are. I know we have outstanding lay leaders. I know we have this incredible larger Twin Cities and Minnesota Jewish community. And as you alluded to, we just got to spend an incredible time together with the Minneapolis Jewish Federation on the Israel mission. So there's so many connections out there. And I think in that way, after 11 years of being with our congregation and having the partnership that I have with Chazan Dulkin, that being able to step into this role, I may not know the answers, but I love the questions and I love that we have great partnerships.
I love that you brought up that somebody asked you, will you be ready? Because I was going to ask, sort of tangent to that, is how do you know when you're ready? Because obviously 2.5 years is a lot of build up time to something like this. Obviously you hope that on June 1st of 2023, you're closer to being ready than you were 2.5 years earlier, but not even that's really a guarantee, right?
It's not a guarantee. In the same way, rabbinical school doesn't train me to know everything, but it's after 5 years of rabbinical school to know the questions and to know the stories and to know halacha and to learn how much I don't know. And as soon as I think I know something, to realize Well, there's a dimension to it. That's why I love studying text, and being in a Beit Midrash, being in a house of learning is so energizing for me, because we can all be looking at the same text, but each of us arrives with a different identity, a different way of walking and experiencing the world. And so the questions that come up will always be different. And so as soon as I think, oh, I've kind of cracked the code with this text, or this piece of Gemara, or rabbinic literature, or Torah, somebody else is going to come to the table and offer from their experience a different perspective. And that's what I love about being a leader, is that I get to grow as I step into this role, and to kind of like push back perhaps on the sense that things have to be perfect, and move toward this sense of like exploring the questions and being with the questions versus the certainty of the answers.
And I think the idea that you're supposed to have all the answers because you're a rabbi, or the senior rabbi in this case, I think that's just such a foolish notion, because who among us has all the answers? And we talk about all the time about how, the one of the beautiful parts of Judaism, and there are a lot of maddening parts of it too, but one of the beautiful parts of it is that we're encouraged to ask questions. We're encouraged to have these discussions and go in depth. And I think it's great that that's what you want to do with your rabbinate. That's how you look at it.
Yeah, and in some ways it's very traditional. Sometimes we think about practices today, we talk about them being new age. In fact, they're deeply traditional to Judaism. Judaism has long made space for meditation, long made space for mindfulness practice. We often think of those as new ideas, but they're embedded in Judaism. And I think the same with questions, and reclaiming in some ways religion as a foundation for people and a springboard for people, where questions are welcomed. And just think back on the last couple of holidays, Pesach is all about asking questions. And we just confirmed in our confirmation class 26 students who spent the confirmation ceremony responding to a question that they chose. We talk about responding to the question versus answering the question, because they'll respond to it throughout their lives in different ways. There are certain truths, there are certain things that are important to hold true. But I love the fact that our students notice within themselves the capacity to grow. One of the questions invites students to look back at the Devar Torah, at the message of Torah that they delivered at their B'nai Mitzvah, and to notice what changed. What would I say differently? What would I offer the same way? And the more that we can make space for people to ask questions and then model that as leaders, it allows for leadership to emerge that is rooted in morals, rooted in values, rooted in teamwork, and not in this like false perfection that we think other people have. And I often think about one of the teachings from a professor in rabbinical school. I say it all the time. We often compare our insides to other people's outsides. Oh, everyone else has all of this or that figured out. But we're all learning. And the more that we can promote that culture of learning, from our youngest kids running around our preschool to our oldest adults continuing their Jewish learning, that's the kind of community I want to be a part of.
For sure. I mean, the learning doesn't have to stop. The learning shouldn't stop.
Right.
I think if you're doing, whether it's religion or any other thing correctly, like you're constantly learning, you're constantly figuring new things out.
Right. I mean, that's what
that
you're
should
doing
be
now. Right. Who the folk is all about, right? Who's
yes.
in our community, and our community evolves. And thank goodness our community has qualities about it that are the same as it did 80 years ago. And thank goodness those qualities have changed. I couldn't be a rabbi until, the time I was ordained in the conservative movement of Judaism. So I think about it as I both appreciate kind of this insider status, that I grew up enmeshed in such a rich Jewish community. And I know what it's like to be an outsider, and bringing those two things together as a gay man, as somebody who grew up active in the Jewish community, I love what gets created out of that. And I love inviting people to kind of break down some of the binaries, that it's this or it's that. And sometimes say, yeah, it can be both. It can be both at the same time. And so our community can be enriched by, generations and generations of folks who grew up in this community. And then to say there are new folks who are constantly joining.
So you mentioned that you wouldn't have been able to be a rabbi until you actually, like, the rules were changed so that you could, because you are an openly gay man. You were the first, and you're a trailblazer of sort, because you were the first openly gay man admitted to the conservative movement's rabbinical school program. Did you feel any added pressure having, thinking back to that time? Did you feel any added pressure or any sort of recognition of the barriers that were not necessarily crumbling, but at least maybe easier to get over at that time?
I didn't know how to do it any other way than arriving as I did, as an openly gay man. I had just graduated college. I was 22. I think intellectually, I had wrapped my head around the fact that some of my classmates and some of my professors not only opposed my ordination, but fundamentally opposed my identity. And I had a professor who told me he believed in reparative therapy, in what he considered the possibility of a gay person being able to become straight. So intellectually, I had prepared myself. Oh, of course, this is a time of change. And I had learned from women colleagues how challenging it was and continues to be for women rabbis and cantors. And I had prepared myself intellectually, but being in a class with, taking a lecture with, that was an experience I couldn't quite prepare myself for. And I think at 22, is kind of an unusual experience to have. But I was, I think, energized when people didn't want me to belong. It actually pushed me more to say, I'm reclaiming this thing called religion. I'm not letting it be hijacked. And I think that's often the role of faith leaders today, when so many people, so many folks have said, I'm done with religion. It's oppressive, it's hurtful, it's isolating. To say, well, that could be true of anything in life. That could be true of politics. That could be true of relationships. What about religion is so not redemptive? And so I love the idea of when people say you don't belong, that in rabbinical school was kind of, all right, I'm bringing a chair to the table or resetting the table or starting a new table. And I love the idea that when a no is given like that, that other people can say yes.
How have you seen the movement evolve over the time since you entered rabbinic school, and the movement had sort of changed their stance on allowing ordination?
When I started rabbinical school, the conversation was really narrow to the ordination of openly lesbian and gay students. And there was still a lot of conversation about bi, trans, and non-binary folks. And I remember the first meetings that I had with leadership of the seminary at the time, including the chancellor at the time, had to do with the admission of out trans students. There was not a policy officially barring trans students, but there was no affirming statement. And I know many of us felt it shouldn't be up to students to wonder, or prospective students to wonder, will I be accepted? Will I be admitted? And so we spent a lot of time talking about what does it mean to like, what's next? How do we really engage cultural change? And how do we talk about the ways in which curricula need to change, the way we talk about family needs to change? and expand. And that was really exciting. I think it was also scary for some people who, as we see in our society today, when we say, we're going to make sure more people belong, some folks think, oh, that means less for me. More for somebody else has to mean less for me. And I'm grateful that there were, a lot of students working, allies working, openly lesbian and gay students working to say, what does it mean to be fully affirming of LGBTQ students? And I think that embrace continues to expand as we think about people with disabilities, people of color, ways in which the Jewish community, I think, has always been diverse. It's a matter of how do we make sure everyone can be seen and heard to really be visible for who they are?
It's not like, pie, more for me means less for you. Like that's right. That's not how it works.
Right. Right.
But
Although
I mean,
I think it's always good, or carrot cake, it's always good to have more of.
oh no, listen, more of desserts is fine.
More of desserts, you can't go wrong.
That's right. And yes, that will invariably mean less for somebody else. But like, equal rights for the LGBTQ community is not dessert. More for somebody does not mean less for me.
Correct. We take kind of a cookbook mentality of like dessert or food. I love that, Lonnie, that image, and think that applies to how we engage with people. And I've always thought, since coming out to myself, really around the time of my bar mitzvah, that God is compassionate, and it's human beings who mess up that compassion. And how can we get out of our own way to remind ourselves that God's compassion is limitless? Like, God has plenty to share, and do we have the commitment and imagination to be able to catch up, knowing we can never catch up to God's compassion? So I know for a lot of LGBTQ folks, there's perhaps a dissonance between there's sexuality or gender and religion, or there's sexuality, gender, and God. And God, if we take Torah seriously, God is presented with a diversity of gender, diversity of identity. And how do we just reclaim that from those who are often the loudest and who get the most attention? And that's the exciting work I think we still have to do. So thinking back to when I started rabbinical school in the fall of 2007, and I was ordained in May of 2012, and to see openly trans and non-binary students, and it's one thing to be an ally. I was privileged to have that role, but to notice when the classrooms are more diverse, when women, entered as rabbinical students, the conversations changed. We now take for granted so many rituals that are just what we do. They're traditional. And it will be exciting to notice, 20 or 30 years from now, what just becomes traditional, and that our tradition can hold it and is strong enough to hold it.
I think it's interesting that at a time, and we sort of touched on this before we started recording, but like at a time where you have a couple of rabbinic students coming in this year for the high holidays, and enrollment is down. There have been plenty of articles from national publications about how the need for rabbis is growing as people retire. There just aren't enough students to fill the openings that are continually coming up, whether it's for rabbis aging out and retiring, rabbis burning out and needing to do something different. These past few years have been very taxing on all of us, but I know being a rabbi is a 24/7 job, and I would think that narrowing the criteria and excluding people because of who they are from the possibility of joining the rabbinate seems sort of like cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Yeah, and it reinforces this sense of Judaism that is dogmatic, and it's traditional to evolve.
Yeah.
Kind of reclaiming this sense of it's tradition or change. It's traditional to change. The only reason we have Judaism today, or one of the reasons, I don't want to say the only, is that when faced with cataclysmic disaster and temple destruction, we decided we're going to keep this thing going. And that meant changing how we worship. It meant changing how we gather. It meant moving away from sacrifices. It meant change was essential to the system. And that's what we get to play with. We don't just change because it feels good. We change because it's essential to what it means to be Jewish, and that being Jewish has an ever expanding meaning. And I think that's exciting. And it goes back in some ways to how we started about creating intention. And so when we make change, how do we do it thoughtfully, and how do we do it collaboratively? How do we do it as part of, it's not just me, it's part of a team or part of a community. And the more we can do it that way, I think those changes become embedded in who we are and what we do.
That would be the perfect full circle moment to end on. But I wanted to touch on the fact that something else we talked about before we started was the fact that because it's mid-June, you're in full high holiday planning mode, which seems crazy to those of us who aren't in the clergy. But for you, this is this is like a couple months in the works now, right?
It is. We're really excited. In fact, tonight is our annual meeting, our 139th annual meeting. And the Chazan Zalkin and I are going to be presenting some of our vision for the High Holy Days this year that we've been working on, that we've been in conversation with folks, noticing, what has been so beautiful about the past, and not discarding that, but saying, how do we allow it to keep growing? How do we allow it to keep expanding? And so one of the pieces that I think we really want to emphasize and speaks to how we operate as a community is, I may have come to hear a particular tune to Adon Olam, and I don't hear it, but the person down the pew from me hears that Adon Olam that I don't like, and they think, wow, like that takes me to such a deep and special place. And that's why I came to Shul, and to cultivate that sense of empathy and compassion. I would hope that's part of what my rabbinate can be about, in knowing what it's like to have been on the outside and knowing what it's like to be on the inside, and to notice we may come from different life experiences and points of view, and different favorite Adon Olam tunes, or different favorite desserts, but that we're here building something that can be transformative when we operate from that place of compassion and empathy.
One of the things we didn't mention, I don't want it to distill the service in general, or certainly not the high holiday service, to like a performance. But, part of being the senior rabbi is that now you get the first, you lead the service on the bima in the main sanctuary for the first time on the high holidays, correct?
So you may be surprised. We're being a little bit playful. We are doing high holidays.
Okay. I'd be confused if the Adath as a synagogue was not doing the high holidays.
You can mark them down. They're happening. We're doing them in the fall. Not to worry. But we're trying to be playful. And yes, the clergy will all be in the sanctuary. But we're trying out different ways of connection. That, as I said before, meditation has always been part of Jewish tradition. Mindfulness, kind of wandering in the fields, deeply Hasidic practice. And so how might the clergy not only be on the bima, but taking part in a nature walk, doing some kind of kol nidre experience outdoors? We have a beautiful lake. How do we appreciate nature? Again, deeply embedded in our tradition. We love to hear that people go for a walk by the lake on a holiday. How do we build that in more intentionally to what we're doing, and making sure the clergy are visible, not only leading a service, which is so meaningful, but also taking part in other expressions of spiritual life.
Well, that's fascinating. And it really, I think, speaks to the, sort of what we talked about earlier, just sort of the evolution of Judaism and, conservative movement Judaism, that it's not just being done the way it's always been done for the sake of doing it the way it's always been done.
Right.
It's finding new and meaningful ways to engage and connect.
That's right. Otherwise it becomes an idol, and we're not idol worshipers.
We don't do that.
If we take the past exactly as it's been and bring it forward to the present and into the future the same way, that's idol worship. But how do we take what's so beautiful about the past and maybe debate that? There's going to be disagreement about what we hold on to, but we do so with a sense of reverence and irreverence, and we do so with a sense of seriousness and playfulness, and say, this tradition is beautiful, and it has hurt people and it has healed people, and both things can be true. In some ways, that's kind of queering the rabbinate. Instead of saying it's only this or it's only that, to say, yeah, Judaism has been a source of connection and Judaism has been a source of hurt, and to acknowledge both and to say, okay, what's the path that we get to create together?
Well, it's fantastic. And it'll be very, very interesting sitting in the pews to see how it all looks. It'll be very exciting.
Well, I hope to see you in the pews or by the lake or going for a walk or doing yoga, or learning, like really uncovering our text and Beit Midrash, diving into the text. So wherever I see you on it, it'll be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Last couple questions before we let you go, though. First, what is your favorite Jewish holiday? And I love asking this of our clergy in the Twin Cities, because really always get such interesting answers.
I know it's not fair to say like I love all of them for different reasons. I'm going to give Simchat Torah a shout out.
Okay. Don't get that one a lot.
I know. So I want to, there's something so joyous about lifting up and dancing with the Torah scrolls and seeing our kids break out in song and dance on the bima, and see families with young kids, see older adults, and there's something magical about that. It's both organized and very chaotic, and there's not always a script for it. That people just feel moved to truly take hold of a Torah, to see people who came to Judaism later in life, to see people who felt rejected, to see people who grew up in Judaism. That's amazing. And I love the holidays where there's like that activity to embrace something and to hold something. There's nothing like that. And so I'm giving a nod to Simchat Torah today.
Excellent. And what is your favorite Jewish food?
I love a good brisket.
Okay.
But I would say I'm a native New Yorker. So a good bagel or a black and white cookie.
Oh, excellent choices. Very excellent. You can't really go wrong with any of those three, but I can understand the pull of a good bagel or black and white.
Absolutely. Totally. And I'm just listing more and more foods. So if anyone sees me and they happen to have a bagel or a black and white cookie,
or just a spare black and white in their car, they should just hand one to you.
They should just hand one. Like, oh, I have a slow cooker in my car. I have some brisket. Here you go.
All right. Well, we'll be on the lookout for you with make sure we load up a car with slow cookers, and we'll be ready to feed you as we drive people driving around the Twin Cities. Rabbi Aaron Weininger, thank you so much for joining me today, and again, Mazel Tov on your ascension to the senior rabbi position at Adath.
Thank you, Lonnie. It was so much fun getting to talk with you.
The Who the Folk podcast is part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network, a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.